Flowise is a user interface for Langchain, and Flowise makes it easy where you can drag and drop any of these blocks. And in the background, it's using Langchain components to run the code. So in the example here shown on the screen, we look at SERP API, calculator block, and the agent here. All of these are Langchain components, and these are written in JavaScript. And Flowise uses this interface to connect them together in the background with JavaScript. So now, first thing is in terms of installation, if one were to go to this website, you have a few options provided. There is a section for deployment, and within that, you see that there are some of these which are permanent, some are not. So we're going to look at a few of these installation methods. And to begin with, if you were to start with the getting started section, you'll notice that there is instruction about installation using npm install. Some of this is nice if you have some background with installation on local computer, be it Mac or be it Windows or any other type of operating system. If you have Node installed and if you were to follow these two commands, then you will have a local installation. Or if you have done with Docker, that's also something you could do, or there are a couple of other ways that one could install on local machine. Now, the only issue with that is that it's something that we might not be able to connect through Bubble or any of the external web app builders that we're going to be using. So in that case, you might have to run something on these provider services. And if you happen to know how to install locally and also how to connect it from something like Bubble, then feel free to do, because at the end of the day, these are going to be permanent solutions. It's not going to delete your Flowise installation or your flows. Whereas some of the other providers like Render and Railway, and perhaps even Replit, if you don't have a paid account, they might delete your flows. So in that case, you probably have to save the flows every time you run them or every time you update them, in case just to have them available on your machine. Now, the other solutions of the cloud providers, AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, and GCP, these are going to be permanent solutions if you were to install for testing, trial purposes, or for deployment purposes. They'll be persistent across runs. Now, we'll look at two of these installation methods, the easiest and second easiest, and then we'll probably do one of the permanent ones later on in the deployment section. So this one here with Railway, they have provided a template and then you can deploy. It's just a few steps and I'll show that how that could be done. So if you were to head over to the link provided in the course website and click that, you'll see that it takes to the template referred in the Flowise docs. So with that, now you can deploy and it will ask to make a repository. So you can make it something private so you don't necessarily have to worry about public facing code, and you can give it a name. One could call it front end or front end Flowise. With that, you basically deploy the template, and what's going to happen is it will initiate a bunch of installation scripts. Those are mentioned in the docs for Flowise. So those are pre-configured and those are something that's been run right now. Now there's something while this deployment happens I'd like to mention is the Flowise username and Flowise password. This was added to make it where the authorization to the website that they will provide. So once the installation is successful, you'll see something like this, which is green, and this will be your link to the Flowise UI. And now if it is not protected by username password. Anyone can visit that link and make changes. So just to avoid that, one can use these two variables in the deployment, and that is under variables. You can add a new variable, and the name for that will be Flowise username, and then you'll give some value to it, whatever username you'd like. Same thing, you will bring the Flowise password, and then you will, once you add this with your values, then you'll add another of these variables, and then call it Flowise password and give a value. So make sure you add both of them. And then once you add, you'll see that there'll be port and there'll be Flowise username and Flowise password, 3 of those. And with that, now anytime you visit the website, then it will be protected, and you can make sure all of the flows are something that you are making changes and not someone else. So now it took a few minutes, not too long, but then I have the green check mark here as well as this is green. So I can click the link, and it built this web page especially for our installation. So this is something that we can go to and make changes. So in here, you'll notice that there are a few things. One is the left tab, and we have chat flows. These are going to be the flows that you will be making throughout the course. And then marketplace is where you have a few examples. So I like this because at least it gives some idea as how to use some of the blocks. So something along the lines of maybe how do we set up a simple LLM chain? There are a few examples here. How to use maybe AutoGPT. There are a few examples. And we'll cover this throughout the course as what each of these mean. And then there is an option provided recently about tools. This is to use together with some of the blocks or some of the agents available. It's a very recent addition as of this video. And the last is API keys. This is something that one could add to secure the API call. So the one thing you'll notice is each of the chat, you'll have option to create a link that could be accessed through Bubble. So for example, if I were to select a simple LLM chain and then use that in my flow, and also if I were to save this and I'll call this LLM, then there is an option to call it from external application. And this is something that we will be using for Bubble as well. So any of the links provided in Perl or JavaScript or Python, it's going to be similar. And this link is currently without authorization. So there's an option to add a default key, or you add your own key, which acts like a password to call these links. And we'll cover that as well in future videos. So for now, just to give you an idea, that is the API section. It could create multiple APIs. And if you were to be on this main page, you have an option to load database and export database. This is quite helpful. So as mentioned, these installations on Railway and Render are not persistent. So with that, it is better to have an export of database when you have worked on something. So it basically gives a JSON file that you can upload later on, and then that will be the exact same flows that you have worked on previously. Now, when you are in any of the flow interface, so let's say if you were to start a new one, some things that you'll notice is this is where you add any of the blocks. So be it chains, LLMs, or anything that we will be dealing, you can easily just drag and drop those elements here. And then each block will have something that you need to provide as an input and something that could be used as an output from here. And if you see anything like this where you can provide some documentation or you can paste something, there's usually a sign to make it bigger and add that text in here with a little more space, so that makes it easy. And then a few times you'll have some additional parameters saying what else you can provide to that block. Now, the other buttons that you see here, one is every time you have a new flow or every time you worked on a flow, you will have to save it so that that is the latest that you are working with. And then in settings, you have an option to load a chat flow, or if you had something that was already saved, as in this LLM flow, then you will have an option to export the chat flow. So all of this is exported as a flow, and also you can load later on in a different flow. There's also an option to duplicate this complete. So in case if you had a lot of blocks in here, you can basically duplicate, and that gives you the option to create a similar duplicated version of the flow. And also the thing mentioned earlier is there is an option to call this flow from external sources. So it makes it easy to call from Bubble or external provider. Not just that, one could also embed this chat widget, which is over here. This is the chat widget. You can ask questions and it will go through the flow that you have built and provide responses based on that flow. So this is something that you can also clear the chat and start with a new chat. So without any history, you can expand it. That is also an option. And you can embed that same widget somewhere else. There are configuration with each of these tabs. So we will talk about some of these in our videos. In addition, you can scroll in, scroll out. That gives the zooming option. You can expand it, or you can also lock the view. So that is something that could be done from the UI. So with that, that gives a basic understanding of how Flowise works and what is on the screen. I'll quickly walk you through another way of installation that is also mentioned on the Flowise website, which is using render. And in here, there are a few steps provided, so it's quite detailed and quite nice. Basically, what you need to do is you have to make an account on render.com. So if I were to go to render.com, I have an account already, so I can just go to the dashboard. I have a few of these installations running. What I'm going to be doing is just to follow their template. I'll go to the web service and then connect a repository. And before this, what I had done is I went to my GitHub, and in there, first thing, of course, you'll have to make a GitHub account. And once you have the GitHub account, you're going to search for Flowise. So I will look for Flowise, not in my account, but globally. So it brings up the Flowise repo. And what I'm going to be doing is I will fork this repo. So as soon as I fork it, it'll give me an option as under which account I need to fork it. So make sure it's under your account. If you have multiple accounts, then the account that you intend to fork it in, and just create a fork. And once you do that, then it will be something available in your account. So if I were to go back under the repos, then I can see that it's in my organizational repos. So I've got a bunch of those, but Flowise is the one that I am interested in. And this is what I forked. So it's validated that it's available in my account. And once that is done, I can now head over to render.com. And in here, I can look for that particular repo. I can connect the repo. And then now there are a couple of settings here that you need to configure. So first is a name. I can call this Flowise. I've tested a few of these before, so I'm going to just select maybe test API. And then once that is configured, any region that is preferred by you. And then later on, there are a couple of ways. One is you can run it as Docker. there is also something you can run with Node. So we're going to follow the installation steps provided by Flowise team, which is to use it as a Docker instance. And if I were to look at render settings and with the Docker as runtime, then they have asked to select an instance. So it is something that I would suggest to use at least a starter to have them not delete your flows every so often. Although you could give it a try with free version if you like, but at least a starter version will keep some persistence. So I'll go back to render. I'm gonna select Docker and then starter here. Now, as mentioned before, again, you can add the Flowise username and the password. So if you were to look again in the documentation, and in here you can add Flowise username. So I'll take that as a variable. And then same thing with the password. I'll take that as the variable. And then I'll drop in here. And then just give it any value that you would like for the username and password. So let me just quickly say test, and I'll just add some password test23. And now let's see. The last step is to just create a web service, and that works. So I'm basically following along with the installation steps provided by the Flowise team. So now, once the installation starts, you'll see that there is a few things happening here. It just goes through the installation steps, the Flowise repo, especially with the Docker-based installation, and it will execute those commands, and it will take a few minutes, and once completed, then it will be available in your account. So as you might notice that it does take a few minutes here, up to maybe 5 to 10 minutes or so. And while that happens, you'll see different messages. You can just let it run for some time until the deployment is completed. Now, a couple of things that I would like to showcase here is there is an option to make changes to the build that was just started. So you can come in, pretty much edit any of these settings if you did not like or wanted to make changes, then that could be done. Again, this is something, if you have an understanding what's happening here, feel free to do that. You can also change some of the environment variables. So in case if your username password, you forgot that or you would like to change it, then you can come in and change those values. Anytime you make a change and save, then it will trigger a new deployment. But then again, it will take a few minutes and then you'll have your deployment available. And last thing is that render is not permanent. So the way that you can have persistent disk across your installation, and this helps to keep the flows saved somewhere and that you don't lose it. The way you can do it is there are a few steps available on the deployment section. So in here under disk, there is a way to provide a mount path, and we are pretty much gonna copy paste all of this. And with that, you should be able to have a persistent disk. So right now, just to check right with the installation, we still have this in progress. Once that's complete, we should have this link. If we click on the link, then we'll see a UI, which looks basically what we saw before. So what I'm going to do is, while this is still ongoing, it's probably going to take a few minutes. I am quickly going to go in and try to mimic this and have a persistent disk. So we'll go to disk and go to this mount path section. So let's follow along and make that changes. So this is over here. I'm going to add a disk, and in here, I'm going to call this anything, maybe my disk. And the mount path is what we took from the render based deployment docs here. So specify the mount path. So we're going to take that over and provide that in here. And when this is complete, we're good. So 10 gigs is fine. That's good enough size. We can save that. And then what's going to happen is it will try to start something new again. So before that happens completely, we just go to the environment section. And as mentioned in the docs again here, we provide a new key, which is database path. And we will save that in our render. So we'll create a new environment variable, add this as database path. And for the value, again, in the docs, we have this value here that we take that over and then save changes. And one additional thing is to clear any of the previous cache and deploy it again. So with that, it's going to be a completely new installation. So this means that it basically starts from the beginning and it takes into consideration the new disk that we added, as well as the connection to that disk. And with that, if you were to save and revisit the Flowise website, the links and the installation and the flows will all be persistent. So this will take a few minutes, but then after that, you should have a website that is a working link. With that, that covers the installation section. And if you have any questions or if you run into any errors, feel free to let me know and we can have a look at that. Thanks.